So let's talk about the single leg lift. Now this is also a rebalancing technique, and it is so technical and there's so many things to have to cue, but the specificity and the ultimate goal here is to help the reflexive and rooting mechanism go back into balance. As opposed to doing the 3D breath breakdown in 3D breath, that 3D breath was actually activating the reflexive mechanism and challenging it to go into action faster. So remember, when you do this, you could always find your core and make your sound to activate the reflex before you challenge your rooting mechanism. So this is about going from 4 bases of support to 3, and then 2 bases of support to 1. So listen to me cue this through. So either you put your palms on the ground or fingertips, but no forearms. So watch how Marissa keeps her forearms off of the floor. And she's going to take a breath in, she's going to find her core, and I'm going to start her by just lifting her left foot just an inch off the ground. So what you want to do is keep your foot very close to the floor, and what you're trying to do is not hip flex, or to hip flex as little as possible, and then set your foot back down to the ground. And then you take a breath in, and again you find your core. If you need to, you make your sound, and then you slowly try to decompress your right foot just an inch off the floor, again reducing as much hip flexion as you can to decompress the weight of your foot, and then you set it back down. So once you understand how to do the lift, you repeat it a second time, again reducing as much hip flexion as you can to hover your foot. This is challenging your nervous system from going from 4 bases of support to 3 as she holds her leg up, and then set it back down, and then again she'll find her core and lift it up again. So what you want to notice when you first do this move is how much your body shifts, lifts, or tips to the side, and how much your arms activate for you to go from 4 bases of support to 3, and then you set the foot back down. Now you want to challenge your autopilot to send ground force reaction to 1 foot faster. So you place your hands on the front of your belly, and you want to have your elbows flared a little, so don't let people cheat and set their foot onto the ground. And she's going to try to do the same thing. She's going to take a breath in, she's going to find her core, and she's going to try to decompress one of her feet from the ground. And you can see how her body right away starts to activate. The belly will want to pop up, so you want to really try to find that core activation, and then you set your foot back down. Now listen, this is not about a balancing act, so it doesn't matter how much she shifts or fidgets, she's going to try it on the other side. And on one side, you're going to find that you do it much better. You can see how she moves a lot more doing one side than the other, and that's about ground force reaction, and then you set your foot back down. So you just want to notice on one side you might do it much better than the other, so she'll do it a second time. Yes, good one on that side. And then set her foot back down. But then she tries it on the other side, and you'll find that on her left side she has a little bit of a hard time finding ground force control. And Marissa has had some left leg issues, so I'm not surprised that she's having a harder time on that side. But it's irrelevant. You set your foot back down after you've done it just 2 times, and you set your hands back on the ground. The question here is when you go to repeat the single leg lift, going from 4 bases of support to just 3, do you feel like you shift, lift, or move less, and that you actually show that you've reacquired some ground force reaction? So she's going to try it again, lifting, and again just watching if the belly pops up, and then setting that foot down, and then same thing, taking a breath in, on the exhale finding the core and lifting that foot. So again, as little hip flexion as you can, and you do it 2 times to see if you've reacquired any balance in the motion. So that's the actual principle and technique. This is really just a way to help your autopilot reacquire ground force reaction, ground force control, through challenging the rooting mechanism by lifting the foot. So I'm going to have her go through this one more time. Yep, placing hands on the belly, taking a breath in, and again reminding them that as they lift, that again, it's about control, and then setting that foot back down. So again, neurologically, it doesn't matter that the autopilot has a harder time finding ground force reaction. You challenging the ground force control is what's helping the autopilot reacquire its connection to the center of gravity, rebalance the rooting and reflexive timing, so that you have better control, better spinal stabilization, and better movement and pelvic stability as you move. Awesome. So I'm going to have Marissa do what everyone does on the single leg lift, which is actually lift her foot by acting upon the hip. So they'll want to lift their leg up. And doing something like this when your leg comes up, why is this wrong? Is that you're actually shortening the hip flexors, and that's part of the rooting mechanism. You want to try to keep the rooting mechanism as absolutely neutral as you can, so that as the foot comes up off the ground, there's less action at the upper fibers of the hip flexors, but creating the kinetic chain and the stabilization throughout the whole rooting mechanism. So the less you actually flex at the hip, the more control you're going to reacquire once you don't do the technique. So remember, we're trying to rebalance the reflexive and rooting timing by keeping the movement small and subtle. So the less you actually flex at the hip to get your foot off of the ground, the better. So just make sure that you keep the movement small and controlled. This will actually heighten the reflexive and rooting responsiveness, so don't make it very big.